All right, City Council is back from break, and we're continuing with AB 17-106, study session regarding miscellaneous downtown code amendments, part 2. And we're going to start off with Councilmember Sandberg on item number 3, which is space between buildings and side setbacks.
Thank you. Just to clarify, this change only applies to lots less than 15,000 square feet?
Yes, that's the Planning Commission recommendation.
And this is the only code change which we're considering that applies to lots under 15,000 square feet, or does the open space requirement also apply there?
I think the recommendation was to consider a change on open space requirements on those same size lots.
Okay. And since I get to start again, sort of, I'm just going to reiterate my concern about when we reduce setbacks, and I can see the point of providing more flexibility for developing those small infill lots, I'm more accepting of reducing setbacks interior to the buildings. But when we talk about reducing setbacks to existing residential, I get uncomfortable with that. I mean, we went through a really extensive process where we made setbacks the way they were with existing residential in those, the downtown transition, general downtown corridor. And so I'm not supportive of making changes there. And I think you made the point that, well, in the Maywood Hills sub-area, they can already, I'd imagine side yard setback, 5 feet, minimum 5 feet, 15 feet total, either side. Is that what you're referring to?
In Maywood, it's just a straight 5 feet. And
on either side?
Yeah.
And yes, it might seem, we'll be consistent with what exists already in Maywood Hill, but there's a difference when you're an existing home being built next to another home versus being built next to a multi-unit building. And so in one of your examples, it was the one with the 3322 massing.
This one?
Yes. What is the size of that lot? Do we know?
That lot is just under 15,000. It's about 14,700.
Okay, and so, I mean, not lots in that area for single family are not 9,600, but maybe to give an idea of scope and scale, it would have traditionally or historically been built with maybe 2 homes, and now we're talking 12 here. So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate in terms of I feel really uncomfortable changing setbacks adjacent to existing residential, because even if those setbacks already exist in Maywood Hills, it's not the same when you're locating home against home versus home against multifamily development. And so I can be supportive, because you said the requirement now is that buildings be separated by 20 feet, and the change is to reduce that to 10 feet?
On these smaller lots, yeah.
Okay. If that reduction gets us to massing that is more similar to single-family homes from a setbacks on the interior, I can support that. But I still want to keep those the setbacks against existing residential.
Councilmember McNeil.
I would have to agree with Councilmember Sandberg on the existing setbacks for existing residential. I had a question on the windows. I think there was a comment or somewhere, I can't find it now, where it mentioned the windows would have to be offset.
Yeah, that's the recommendation in situations where you reduce the setback for buildings with living space windows to 5 feet, that there would be an additional requirement that they be offset from the neighboring buildings' windows.
So if there's an existing element residential unit, and you're putting a new structure, a new building in, the developer would have to offset the location of that window, correct?
Correct.
So essentially, a pre-existing development would dictate where the new development windows would go,
To some degree, yeah.
okay? And then, if not if I build if a new development goes in today, then it would dictate where the windows go on a future development if it was,
If they were taking advantage of that reduced setback with living space windows.
okay. And then it takes me back to the question that I asked earlier, if these setbacks, these configurations give us a higher yield. Once again, to me, it seems like if you have a lot that's borderline of being able to get an additional unit and you reduce the setback, they potentially could get that unit.
Yeah, on some lots it will. On this particular lot, the yield was the same with the separated buildings and the combined building. The thing that more often than not controls the unit yield is how many parking spaces they can provide, and that's been the case in both of in these examples as well.
So when you say how many parking spaces they can provide, in your examples, these are 2-car garages?
Yeah, for the most part, they're 2-car garages. Some are tandem, some are side by side.
And the average square footage for these is bedrooms that you're anticipating are?
Well, these are townhomes, and so they're typically 2 and 3 bedrooms, sometimes 4 bedrooms is what we're seeing, which is significantly different than the apartment development that we've been seeing downtown, which is predominantly studio 1-bedroom and a few 2 bedrooms.
So if I think about a residential housing unit that has 3 and 4 bedrooms, maybe 1 or 2 teenagers, potentially 3 or 4 cars. I live next to a few of those, by the way. Mm-hmm. Where do they park?
Well, I guess the first thing is I would expect that a family with 4 cars is less likely to purchase this particular type of unit. These spaces have a limited number of visitor parking spaces, and this particular lot has 2 street frontages with on-street parking that would be available as well.
Okay, well, I guess I'll close with that, but I would cautiously say that coming from a background of previously building production family housing, now being in single-family housing, there definitely is a difference with the way that people live in multifamily townhomes and condos. And I will tell you that if you drive through the typical townhome project, there's multiple cars that are parked up on the sidewalk and curbs, especially the alleyway ones. So to me, it's kind of off topic here because we're talking about space between buildings, but it begs the question, once again, to me, are we allowing enough parking? Again, we don't know. We're speculating how they're going to use these units, but it just coming back once again to 2-car garages, smaller setbacks. Are we really allowing enough parking for the development that we're allowing? Did you get enough answer from me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
So with the setbacks of 10 feet, they have to have a minimum fire-resistant rating, is that correct?
No, not with a 10-foot separation.
Oh.
If they go below 6 feet, then
then they have to have that?
Yeah.
And on Lower Maywood Hills, what's the separation there? And what rating do they have on their exterior walls?
Well, Lower Maywood has 5-foot side setbacks, so you could have neighboring buildings 10 feet apart.
With no fire resistant rating?
Again, that's not my area of expertise, but minimum fire separation distance greater than 5 feet, no fire resistance rated. Less than 5 feet. So if you go to the minimum 6 feet, you would have to have fire resistant construction. But
Yeah, not real thrilled on that, and it's not my area of expertise anymore also, but I know exposures are a huge thing when it comes to fires. We had a big one down here, and we had some huge exposure issues. So, I don't know, let me dwell on this a little more.
So, I'm trying to get my head around, Mr. Boyd, this whole section where it talks about setbacks in between buildings inside of a development. And it's not abundantly clear that the setbacks will be changed to adjacent outside setbacks from property lines. Can you help me understand what they're proposing to do here?
Yeah.
Is it just between the buildings inside the development, or are they trying to reduce the setbacks on the exterior of the development to the adjacent existing development?
Both. We're combining two things in this amendment. So on these lots smaller than 15,000 square feet, you would be able to reduce, you can still have a 5-foot side setback, but you're not allowed living space windows, which is, so you would get at that 5-foot setback something like what is shown here. Now, like I said, these actually turn out to be garage spaces that could have windows, but this illustrates that. And then to have living space windows, though, you need to set back 10 feet, an additional 5 feet. And since the building separation requirement is somewhat, basically is equivalent to 2 side yard setbacks with living space windows, if we allow that side setback to go down to 5 feet with living space windows, then it's followed that the building separation requirement of 10 feet would be in keeping with that. So that's how that.
So right now it's 10 feet if you have windows.
And a 20-foot building separation within the site.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're proposing to change it to what? 5?
For 5 feet for the side setback and 10 feet building separation within the site.
So I'm okay with the within the site part, because I am okay with that. But the adjacent properties, I'm have some concerns about that. Councilmember Sandberg, I think, said those were established with these particular zones in mind, adjacent to existing development, to try to preserve or protect the existing quality of life, basically, of those properties. I don't know. I was just thinking if it was my property and there was going to be a wall 5 foot off of the property line, I don't know how I'd feel about that. There you go. There's my input.
Okay, thanks.
So this is going to sound off topic, but it's not. I'm curious, what is the zoning on Riverside where Blueberry Estates is, and that grotesque 3-story skinny apartment building next to it? Because it looks like those buildings are 10 feet or less together. So I'm trying to get some context for what we're agreeing to, because I'm really not okay with that. And I don't know if it's because we need a design review committee, but I mean, just because they're on the same site, to me, I mean, it sounds like that's what we're trying to implement, and yet they've already done it in that zone. And so I'm curious what the zoning is for that area.
I need more specific information on exactly which development.
The Blueberry Estates is the new assisted living
on the
on the
north side of
yeah, on the north side of Riverside
the wedge-shaped building right next to it.
with a wedge shape next to a traditional
Okay,
pitched
that's
roof house.
R2800 zoning,
Okay.
which is what the corner lot site here used to be zoned pre-downtown plan.
So currently, they're already able, so currently, I'm assuming that it's a 10-foot setback. So what we're talking about is, would match that, right? Because each building has a 5-foot setback, so it adds up to 10, is that?
Well, and I believe on a single lot currently outside of the downtown, we will allow construction as close as 6 feet together. That's what you see on many of the detached condo projects like Collage up off of Bothell Way north of downtown. So I suspect that one may have a 6-foot separation between those two buildings.
So we're allowing 6 foot already on a single property, but the reason why it doesn't apply to downtown condominium / townhouses is because they're sold as separate pieces of property?
No, because the downtown has a separate code. So the downtown code would not allow the 6-foot separation.
So that's
Right now,
what's confusing to me, because you would assume that downtown would have a higher density, therefore smaller setbacks than Riverside, where you've got huge lots. And I'm totally confused how that happened. And do you understand my quandary?
Yeah, I do. And that's actually part of the reason why Planning Commission made this recommendation, is recognizing that outside of the downtown in Lower Maywood, you can have 5-foot setbacks with no restrictions on living space windows. And as you get into the more dense neighborhood, the setback increases. Now, there is some rationale behind that. That if you're going to have bigger, more dense development, you need a bigger buffer. But that was the thinking. And I can bring some additional analysis related to those.
Because it seems odd to me that Riverside, where the properties are big and the buildings are really far apart, on one single site you're allowed to put a 3-story building that's completely has nothing to do with the building next to it, unless it's care workers' apartments. Completely 2 different styles, 2 different heights, and they're 6 feet apart. So I don't know if we need to change the code, or if that's a code change. I don't know if that's a design review issue, but that concerns me. It just doesn't seem contextual. And then I guess I'm fine. I do agree. Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg, for bringing up setbacks with existing residential. I agree. I don't think it's appropriate for someone to suddenly have a 5-foot setback when the property next door to them develops. And then I would say in general, I'm a little bit torn, because I almost prefer 0 setback than 5 feet. Or I just don't see the value in that other than light. And I think there are other ways to accomplish light, like staggering the building so that everybody has a little extra piece of wall at the front or back where they could put windows. It sounds like everyone else is okay with it, though, so I guess you have your answers. But I guess yeah, I'm really torn, because when I see that something like what happened on Riverside can happen, I just can't really understand how that works with downtown. It just seems counterintuitive, I guess. So if you could have a recommendation how to fix something like that. Because, I mean, it makes me wonder if a developer could come in and do your 3322 layout that you showed, and they could be completely different styles, just because they felt like it and they don't have any taste. And it seems to me that in Bothell, that maybe that's allowed. I guess I'm concerned about that.
Yeah.
Especially when they're that close together. It just seems like there should be some sort of rule about they have to actually, you know what I mean, fit.
Yeah, and I think the downtown architectural regulations and guidelines do would provide that guidance. But I'll come back when I bring it back. I'll identify the parts of the code that do address that.
Okay, yeah, that would be really helpful and would make me sleep better at night. Thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
I told you I'd get back to you on that waffling on that 5-foot setback. I'm not in favor of it, and I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting to 9:30.
Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Agnew, seconded by Councilmember Sandberg to extend the meeting to 9:30. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, please your vote. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Spivey and Freed absent and excused. Councilmember Sandberg, do you want to start us off on item number 4, which is canopies and
Sure.
balconies in the right of way?
So now that I've seen the proposal from Planning Commission, I plan to walk around in the next month before July 25th to get an idea of how other jurisdictions handle these balconies, because canopies add architectural interest, and they're not as obtrusive as a balcony. And when I look at your picture, your side view picture, with these balconies that could extend over half of the sidewalk or 6 feet, whichever is less, it seems as though that really does change the streetscape. And so my initial inclination is to leave the balcony requirements as is, which is extending 2 feet into the right of way, if I understand that correctly. Because is that the current code allows balconies to extend 2 feet, which is the upper description?
Correct.
And then the proposed change is the lower balcony. And yeah, they can both provide cover from the rain, but a balcony is so much more obstructing and potentially less architecturally interesting if it's in a 50-foot linear dimension or up to that than canopies.
Councilmember McNeil.
I'm actually of the same opinion, but I have a question on the Planning Commission. I think you mentioned that they were torn on this one from the balconies to the awnings because of lighting. And then you had mentioned something about glazing.
Correct.
So an awning can be of a fabric material or a glazing, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so if that sticks out 6 feet and it's glazing, it still allows that natural light to come down, and basically the sidewalk is still pretty well lit with that natural light,
Yeah.
correct? If you put a balcony out there, what would there be restrictions on the type of balcony, or it would just be a solid surface balcony?
I think balconies by definition will be opaque. You can do glazed floor panels, but that would be exceedingly expensive. I wouldn't expect to see that. But they are required to be that 14-foot height limit, so they would be high enough to not shade the sidewalk as much as a 8-foot high canopy, which is the minimum height to the bottom of a canopy or awning.
And then you show an illustration of the front of the junction. It appears to me that there's a balcony on the facade of that building. Is that, if I'm looking at that correctly, is that the roof of the first floor?
No, that is, was their proposal. This is what they wanted to do, but the corner of that balcony extended more than, well, first of all, the balcony extended more than the 2-foot allowed, and the corner even extended further than the 6-foot, because the property line follows the curb line there. So they weren't able to do this. And instead, that space, which is a single space, office space behind it, is going to have 2 separate balconies.
Okay, so I guess I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So what appears to be the east side of that building, which is on the multi-way boulevard where the pavers are,
Right.
to me, it appears that that building is the roof of the first floor. Is that not how you're seeing that?
It actually extends beyond. So the wall plane here, this window wall is on the same plane as this window wall down here, and the balcony extends beyond that.
Okay, so the glazing on the first floor is back to the same where the glazing is on the second floor?
Yes.
Okay. And then what it appears to be further to the north, there's awnings that are protruding out over the walkway. Are those
Yeah.
currently being put in, or were those eliminated also?
I don't know for sure if the plans include those. I suspect it will. And this hasn't been eliminated entirely. It's just been, the corner piece has been cut out so that it's not a connected balcony.
Okay, so where the doors are, it looks like there's somebody in the red there.
Down here?
That is the part that's overhanging.
Yes.
The rest of it is basically flush with the first floor. Is that what you're saying, or no?
Well, the window walls are on the same plane all the way
Okay.
around the corner, from the first to the second floor.
Okay. I guess I would have the same concern about the lighting. I mean, if you look at this as an example, if you have a balcony that extends pretty much the whole length of a building, the whole length of a sidewalk, whether it's 14 feet tall or not, to me it seems like it's cutting off natural light. And the reason I say that is because you're going to also have trees that are going to get bigger along there, correct?
Correct.
So then all of a sudden the trees are getting wider, we're maintaining the trees, cutting them back from balconies. So to me it seems like we're creating quite a bit of shadowing in those areas. So I guess I'm kind of in the same, I'm kind of questioning whether or not we'd want to have a balcony on that 14 feet up that extends out that far.
I guess I'm next. I approved the Planning Commission's recommendations on this. I think it has some aesthetic value, and I think it would make the downtown a little bit more interesting, a little bit more cosmopolitan.
Can I just get some clarification? Planning Commission was divided on this, so are you approving the staff recommendation?
I'm approving staff's recommendation.
So it's my turn. I appreciate that we did have a city attorney review this. This kind of makes me think back to my day job, where we had an underground parking garage built into the right of way. There's a lot of issues with that. I mean, it could be a nice amenity and everything else, but I think your illustration is kind of a good one because it shows the lamp post there, and you got the tree in the way. You know, an inductor truck isn't 14 feet tall. There's a lot of things that you could have happen on that sidewalk where you need to get access. And let's say we hit that balcony while we're doing some maintenance, and it's in the right of way. Who's fixing it? Who's going to fix that balcony? It would be us, right? I mean, it'd be the public.
Yeah, I would say that would be the party that did the damage.
Yeah. So I always have a lot of hesitation, and it's same with underground. We have an underground garage that goes into the right of way, and we have a utility leaking or something like that. We obtain a whole bunch of liability, in my opinion, to allow people to build things into the right of ways. instead of just keeping those for the public domain for the services and utilities that we provide. Do we currently allow, I mean, just back to the junction there, so we do allow a 2-foot balcony at 14 feet high now over the right-of-way?
Yes, and these balconies may appear to extend more than 2 feet, and that's because the building face is actually set back slightly from the right-of-way just because of the configuration of the lot. It's not in a perfectly 90-degree corner there.
So I feel a whole lot better about a 2-foot balcony than a 6-foot balcony at 14 feet tall, because I think there's a lot of municipal services and things that would need to happen on that sidewalk. And having it protrude 6 feet out into the right of way where we provide all of our services and utilities, I just have some concern about that. Would you like to weigh in on that, Assistant City Attorney Darcy, on your first day? About liability and...
I certainly, if we were maintaining something in the right of way and were negligent in our actions, we would be liable for the property damage. You know, I don't see the same concern if someone else's utility is in our right of way, you know, your other example. But you're correct about who would be liable there. The same would be said of any, you know, whenever we're negligent in our maintenance activities. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, so I'm thinking about the balcony capital of the world, New Orleans. And from my recollection, the balconies don't come out into the right of way. And so I guess I'm looking at potentially maybe some sort of compromise, like perhaps 4 feet. It would be interesting, I think, if we could find a way, if we're worried about light, it's really not difficult to do a shading diagram, or to, you know, the sun on December 21st at noon and where the shadows fall and that sort of thing. And maybe if we have specific requirements, like we don't want the sidewalk shaded or whatever, I mean, those things can be worked around. Can you tell me so this is just for the downtown area, the canopy?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the typical length of a city block?
Bothell city blocks are approximately 300 feet north to south. Some of them are double blocks, so around 600
So
feet.
50, we're talking, it's like a sixth of the block at a time can be balconied. And then it's just, I assume there's a break and you could do another 50 feet in another, or how did we foresee that?
Yeah, theoretically you could have, you know, on a large development like this, you could do multiple 50-foot balconies, yeah.
So in this scenario, it would be balcony, I don't know, would it be balconies for living units or balconies for office units, or it could be either?
Well, it could be either. This particular proposal was for a balcony off their office space, second floor office space.
Okay. I don't know. I guess the more I think about it, I can see it would be kind of nice to have some rain shielding. I don't know about you, but I don't like to walk in the rain if I don't have to. So I don't know, maybe 3 feet or something. I think 2 feet is a little small, but 3 feet you might actually be able to fit a chair or something. Instead of just kind of opening the window and saying you have a balcony, you might actually be able to use it if it were a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what that is, 4 feet or 3 feet, but I could see doing something like that. The other thing, this is not something that I work on a lot, but I did take the 2015 Seattle Code Amendment class. And I would encourage you to look at some of the code amendments that they've made in the Seattle Code, because they're basically saying if it's not a graded metal decking, then it's considered floor area, not a projection. And so I would just look at what maybe some of the ramifications are in terms of fire code. I know Seattle is not always the same as IBC, but a lot of times they're more progressive, and eventually some of their code specific changes are taken up by the IBC. And so it might be worth kind of looking at how it might impact us, especially since Tom's already brought up the fire code. Because I think if it's not, I believe it has to be rated. So that might impact things too. I think that was all I had. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. I do agree. I would like to know how other jurisdictions handle this sort of thing. It would be helpful to know what Kirkland does, and just to get a sense of what the other options are.
Councilmember Sandberg, do you want to kick us off on the last item, which is the public open space requirement? So this wasn't formally, sorry. So it wasn't formally initiated by council. So is it that you want us to say whether we want this formally initiated or not, or do you want us to try to lump this in even though it hasn't gone through our normal?
No, we're suggesting two options, to initiate it and refer it to Planning Commission to come back at a later time, or to not consider further and not initiate it.
So those are the only two options you really want us to discuss?
Correct.
And the content of it? Do you want some input on that too tonight, or?
Well, if you want to initiate it, if you have any input on this, that would be useful. Yeah.
Okay. You want to go first, Councilmember Sandberg?
Sure. Because I had a hard time understanding what you wanted us to do with this, but I see with this slide, it clarified a lot more. And so when I was reading what you were proposing, it seemed as though a developer we might end up with reduced open space requirements, or reduced open space, or fee in lieu charges. And I wasn't sure from the agenda bill what was happening. So can you explain what it is that we do now? Is what we do now encapsulated in that green text?
No. Well, yeah, the first part of the green text explains what our code currently requires. And when you try applying that on smaller sites, it's difficult. A smaller site might not even require as much as 1,000 square feet of public open space. So, and our current code does allow a fee in lieu, and on other small sites, on the 5 unit site, that's what they chose to do, to just go with the fee in lieu instead of trying to provide a tiny little open space. So what we're proposing is, or suggesting is, studying whether, in addition to some different requirements for lots under 15,000 square feet in terms of building separation and side setbacks, that we also take a look at public open space requirements and see if for those type of sites we need to deviate from these minimums that are really more geared towards a larger site. The total amount, we're not suggesting that the square footage per unit change. That would be the same, but they might have a little more flexibility in terms of doing something like what's proposed here, 2 smaller public open spaces.
So can a lot that's a small lot, say one that's less than 15,000 square feet, provide for all of its open space, 100% of its open space as fee in lieu? Or do they have to provide some portion of it on site?
They could, the code doesn't specify, so yes, that would be an option. We might encourage them to provide some on site if there was a reasonable way to do that, yeah.
So the code currently allows them to basically cash it out entirely if they want to.
And none.
And does it let them do a hybrid, like this amount of square footage of open space on their property and then the rest fee in lieu?
Yes. And we're now dealing with the first development that has taken that route, providing as much of the on-site open space as they felt they could fit into the design, and then the rest fee in lieu.
And then this proposal, they want to split it, but the current code does not allow them to split it because there's not 3,000 square feet to split in the first place.
Correct.
But they have other options. They have other options available to them. This is what they would like to do, but they could do they could do one public open space that met the minimum 20-foot wide standard and then cash out the rest.
Correct.
So I would recommend not initiating this. They have other options, and the plate's already full. And I want them to focus on all the other things that have been docketed, and so my recommendation is to not move forward with this.
Councilmember McNeil?
So in the case of the other property that did the fee in lieu, what type of charge, what type of cost is that to a development?
We are basing our fee on what it would cost to purchase and develop the land as park space on site. And we based that on early estimates that were done for the half-acre park, now Horse Creek Plaza, at $45 a square feet. We're taking another look at those numbers now, but that's what we've been telling developers to date. And again, all of the developments to date, Six Oaks, 104, Mercantile, the Junction, have not gone the fee in lieu route. Six Oaks and the 104, since it was the same developer, we did allow them to transfer some of their required open space from the 104 to Six Oaks. They were just able to meet that the requirement better that way.
So they transferred it from one property ownership to another property ownership?
Well, same owner, but two different properties that the same developer had purchased and was developing.
But they are two separate projects, correct?
Right.
So where you have this split right here, 725 and I think it says 485. I can't really read that. It's a little small. In this particular case, could this developer just say, I don't have enough, I just want to do a fee in lieu? And
They could, yeah.
And essentially, they would be, on this particular property, they would be charged at $45 per foot at 3,000 feet.
Well, this one had a 1,950 square feet, so it was just under 2,000 square feet. So it'd be almost a $90,000 payment.
Okay, and then on top of that, well, how many units are in this one? I'm sorry, David?
12.
12. So on top of that, per unit, they would be charged their other impact fees, correct?
Correct.
Per unit.
Yeah, and then the difference being that the public open space requirement in the downtown plan was intended to be provided for on-site, but we established the fee in lieu, recognizing that some smaller sites it may just not be feasible, and the fee in lieu for downtown projects, we've committed to spending that within the downtown sub area, and of course we have a number of parks projects within the downtown sub area that we could use that money for, whereas the citywide park impact fee goes into a citywide pool and can be spent anywhere in the city and to meet citywide parks and recreation needs.
Okay, so the fee in lieu on any property in downtown stays in downtown open space. It doesn't go to any part of our city, correct?
That's the position we've taken, yeah.
So it couldn't go to Snohomish County or anything like that, right?
Yeah, we're saying that it needs to stay in the downtown sub area.
Okay. I guess for me, I think the option of having the fee in lieu, the option of having the open space, I think is important. I think it's important that we create open spaces when we develop. But I think it's important that the open space are somewhat usable as for what they're intended for. So to me, I guess I'm not for, I guess for me, I would rather us take this on and not give it back to the planning commission, but at the same time, I don't think we should be reducing requirements. And I kind of agree with Councilmember Sandberg. I was a bit confused when I read this and trying to understand it. I think I do understand a little bit more with the green text that's there, but to me, I think there's more implications by changing what we're requiring now. Did I give you enough?
Yeah, and we aren't proposing any reductions. We're just proposing perhaps some different standards for smaller sites that would make more sense for the smaller sites.
And that's somewhat what confuses me. So if we're changing the standard for a smaller site, what does that mean?
Well, for example, we could consider allowing a site like this to split the required public open space to create the corner open space that's adjacent to a bus stop, and also the open space on the transition to the outside the downtown sub area that might help kind of ease that transition. That was the argument that was made. We'd have to look at what those minimum sizes would be, but it seemed that a case could be made for having some different thresholds for smaller sites.
So that threshold could be, let's put it in 4 spots instead of 2.
Well, on this site, you couldn't even split it between 2 under the current code. You would be forced to put it in one spot.
And again, that goes back to if they change their design, they could make it work.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, Councilmember McNeil, Councilmember McNeil, sorry, do you want to refer this to the Planning Commission for further consideration or not consider this matter further?
I don't want to consider it further.
Okay. Councilmember Agnew.
Well, I would like to initiate such an amendment and refer it to the Planning Commission. I think we need to try to save as much open space as we possibly can.
So is it in the code right now that was that just kind of a one-off with the 104 transferring its open space requirements to 6 Oaks? And how did that happen? Is that in the code now?
It wasn't. It's not explicitly in the code. That was a director's determination that was a reasonable application of the code.
Because more and more in dense development, we're seeing, people have pets and they need a place for their pet to go to the bathroom outside of their house, preferably. And it seems to me that it's really critical that we have these spaces available to people in these townhomes or, connected condominiums. So, yeah, that's curious to me that we would allow that, because now they're going to have to go on their neighbors' properties. Their pets would have to go on the neighbors' properties, and I don't think that's very neighborly of a new development. So, I would be curious to hear more about this. I mean, splitting it is, I guess, not that big of a deal to me if it makes sense for the site and for the look and feel of the new infill development. So I guess my my recommendation would refer to the planning commission for further consideration, but I also want to know more about I'd rather it be clear that the open space needs to occur on these sites. People buy condominiums and they realize, oh, wait, there's nowhere at all for grass or places for their kids to play or for their animals to go to the bathroom. So I'd like that to be part of it if it goes to the planning commission.
So can I ask, do we have a kitty for the fee in lieu, or does it go to, where's the money sit?
Well, again, we haven't actually received,
Oh, we haven't.
well, actually, we have received the first payment, but I'd have to get back to you with exactly how that's being handled.
I'd be interested also, and can I assume that Bothell Landing is in the downtown area? I'd like to know which parks or which open spaces we could
Yes.
use the money on.
The expansion of the park at Bothell Landing would definitely be a potential benefit.
Seems like we could do a little work there. And then are the open spaces, what are the requirements? Are they impervious? Can they be impervious or grass, or what?
They can be impervious. They're required to be connected to a public sidewalk, to be accessible to the public, and we've had quite a variety. We have the 104 has, in the two indents in the building on the north side, has two little courtyard spaces that are primarily hardscape, but there's some raised planters with some vegetation around those. The Six Oaks has the area where the Six Oaks stand. That's one of their public open spaces. The dog park is another one, and I suppose the folks in the 104 can walk their dogs over there and use that one. And the little courtyard outside their exercise room is a third space there.
So I guess I would like, well, I guess the other question is, what's the planning commission schedule look like for the rest of the year? How are they doing on the things we've already put on them?
I think they're making good progress. A bigger challenge really is the staff time to bring these things both to planning commission and council. And I don't necessarily think this would be an urgent one. It could be, your docket had 2017 plus and 2018 items. It could go in either of those categories. 2017 plus would be to address it this year if we do have time.
Okay. So I guess I would be in favor of putting that on the list anyway to revisit in 2018 and then prioritize. And for me, I would be interested in, making sure we have some sort of minimum requirement so that they can't just pay cash in lieu. But I also think, I look at this plan and I think there's real value in having an open space on that corner. Even one big beautiful tree or a fountain or something would really add to the streetscape. And so although it's not large, I think it does have significant value. And so I think as long as we have a minimum so that it's not abused, I think I would be in favor of providing a little more flexibility. And with that, I'm done.
Councilor Sandberg?
Okay, I have an additional thing that's not one of our topics here, but it's very, very important. On page 50, it's not even one of the things that is discussed here. On page 50, these are the sheets for the district requirements for each downtown district. And page 50 is the requirements for downtown core. And there is a proposed change on table A that would permit business and personal services in the downtown core. And I want to let you know how strongly I'm opposed to that. We had extensive conversations when Friedman was here, when we were drafting the original plan, about the importance of the right mix of uses that going into the downtown to generate activity and excitement and streetscape. So things like, stores that you can shop in and restaurants you can eat at. And he gave an example of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And that stuck in my mind because I'd just been to Jackson Hole, and Jackson Hole has a really cool downtown. Didn't used to be so cool because what was in their downtown was almost exclusively business and personal services. And so Jackson Hole made the concerted decision that over time they wanted to reduce that, not eliminate it, because the existing uses that were there were grandfathered. But as new businesses came online, they wanted the pedestrian-oriented retail. They wanted, the residential uses, because that is what activated the streetscape. And if you look at what business and personal services is, it's on page 56 of our agenda packet, and you can see that on the second column of stuff, it's things like mail and shipping services, insurance services, legal services, travel services, nail salons, dry cleaning. Those aren't the kinds of businesses, when we had this discussion, that we wanted to be in our downtown core, because that's not where the vibrant shopping and eating restaurants and hanging out on the streets occurs. Okay, it doesn't occur with those kinds of uses. And so I don't want them in the downtown core. I don't want them in the general downtown corridor, especially east of 102nd, which is there along the river, because we want that space to be, what's permitted now. And I'm very concerned that when we add in permitted uses, what goes in is what is convenient for the developer at the time. It's who they conveniently can get as a tenant. And in the meantime, that can really diminish the flavor that we're trying to create in downtown. So that's not, in my opinion, that is not a minor change, and I'm really opposed to that.
City Manager, will you kind of look into that and get back to us when this comes back for a public hearing?
I don't perceive that to be a change. Is that
So first of all, that's the reason why they're in the downtown core. There are frontages where pedestrian-oriented retail is required. So that's required all along Main Street from 102nd to Bothell Way, and along Bothell Way north to essentially to McMenamins. There are some business and personal services pre-existing there, the State Farm office and others, the nail salon you mentioned. So this is and this is a change that was already made, actually. Only the highlighted changes are the ones that are being considered now. So and it was done partly to recognize that there are those existing uses, but there's also second level uses that need to be permitted by the code to exist. So we do have offices and business and personal service uses.
But there's a box that says add business and personal services as permitted ground floor, and it points to that language.
That was a previous code amendment that
Well, I think that's a huge mistake that we've made then, and we need to remedy that, because I don't know when that occurred, but I remember very specific conversations with Friedman, Tongue, and Bottomley about why we chose what was the permitted uses in the downtown core and the reasons behind it. And if I would just invite the council, when you look at those types of businesses that are considered personal and business, business and personal services, when you're walking down an activated streetscape and you're thinking, talking and then activity, do those uses support that or detract from that?
And again, that's why on those streets, we do have the retail requirement. So they wouldn't be allowed as a ground floor use. They would be allowed on the backside or on an upper floor.
Well, then that needs to be clear, because it's not clear when I see this here.
So city manager, can you get the clarification on that for us before
Absolutely, absolutely, we
next
will.
public
When
hearing.
we bring it back, we'll have it clarified for you.
Terrific.
Yep.
Mr. Boyd, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Mayor, second by Councilmember McNeil. Any discussion on the motion? Please your vote. Passes 4-1 with Councilmember Agnew in the negative and Councilmember Spivey and Freed absent. Excuse me, adjourned.